Facebook Live report starts now.
Well, welcome into your Facebook Live report. Alyssa Orange here alongside Tara Talmadge, and our Drew Ammon going to join us very shortly. But of course, a very big 24 hours in the sports world. The SEC has stopped the SEC tournament. They have stopped play through March 30th because of the coronavirus, hoping that things will die down a little bit and then they will reassess what they want to do with the rest of the spring sports come March 30th.
Right. So the basketball tournament canceled, baseball postponed, gymnastics canceled. Everything has completely shut down because of this right now. And honestly, it's probably the smart decision moving forward just to be safe. It's interesting to see where things are going to go from here, though, because there are so many questions that I know a lot of people have right now. And I'm also going to pull up our Facebook page to take some of those questions and try and answer them as best we can.
Well, let's go to our Drew Ammon, who is in Nashville. He listened to Greg Sankey's press conference about his decision to shut down the men's basketball tournament and all sports until March 30th. There's an empty arena behind you, Drew. Kind of talk to us about what's happening in Nashville as all of this is developing.
Yeah, I think, Alyssa and Tara, let's begin with the emotional side of things and the fact that Greg Sankey, as commissioner of this league, reflected on a time in 2008 when a tornado struck the Georgia Dome and they had to move the SEC tournament to Georgia Tech. We all saw what happened, a magical run by the Georgia Bulldogs to the SEC tournament title. I bring this up because the emotions come into play for Greg Sankey when he reflects on a time like that, because an athlete came through the hallway and stopped him and said, "Mr. Sankey, this is the greatest day of my life," as Georgia had just clinched the SEC tournament championship. So many modifications had to be made to that tournament based on a weather disaster, what was impacted there in terms of the weather. But here, with this coronavirus, the way it's progressed and what has happened here, you know, he really teared up. Greg Sankey did, and he talked about how this really hit him hard, because you want to give a kid an opportunity to at least have a chance to make a run like that. If it is a team that in a tournament setting can win 4 games in 4 days, perhaps. We've seen it before, and they didn't get that opportunity because only 2 games were played in this SEC tournament. So I bring that up because he talked about the greater responsibility here, and I know, Alyssa and Terry, you can speak to that, and the greater responsibility is clearly public health.
Yeah, Drew, I want to ask you, have you been able to really talk to anybody, even media members, possibly team personnel, on just their thoughts of what's happening? Because this is something we've never seen in the sporting world before.
Yeah, and I think largely when you reflect on what happened yesterday, because we were doing some live shots around 4 or 5 o'clock, and you got a sense as fans were coming in that day, the first round for the tournament, that you had this eerie feeling. It wasn't as festive. It wasn't very upbeat. And so that was the mood the entire time that I was here with our sports director, Jason Carroll. And that is that, you know, you get a sense that today was going to happen, to where obviously it did happen. No fans were going to be allowed in the arena. And then you get the decision, which I learned of as I looked up at the TV around 10:45 this morning. I looked up in my hotel room and I see breaking news: SEC has canceled the tournament. So I think when you consider in the midst of what the NBA did yesterday, you see it become so personal. It hits so close to home at the NBA level. You see what happened. Rudy Gobert gets the coronavirus. He gets the positive test, that is, and then today we hear about Donovan Mitchell also getting the positive test. So when it's at the NBA level and then the MLB suspending operations, I mean, wow. If you're the SEC and leagues across the country at the college level, when you see things like that happening at the national level, then you have so many national recommendations coming into the people that trying to pass along good advice publicly in terms of the local level, then you have to make a decision like this, right?
Yeah, I think you do, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Greg Sankey did say when he was talking on the SEC network that they wanted to be reactionary or wanted to be proactive and not reactive. Yeah. And the last thing they wanted to do was be able to be held responsible if they didn't make a decision and one of their athletes got sick and then have to answer a question of why didn't you do something sooner?
It's a liability for them with everything that was going on. Greg Sankey in his press conference mentioned the fact that, you know, players were taken off the court in the NBA because of this. So for them to cancel the SEC tournament moving forward, honestly, I'm impressed they finished all of their games yesterday with everything that was going on. Yeah. So we also did hear a lot more from Greg Sankey about this going forward. So let's take a listen to what he had to say.
A number of you will ask about return to play. We have work to do there. I don't have all of those answers, and I tell my staff I don't know is a perfectly good answer from time to time, but it can't just be I don't know. You're going to have to do the work to engage and learn how to answer the question eventually. So we've created an interim period where we will work with our campuses to determine how we return to our normal operation. It may not be March 30th. It may be beyond, but that remains to be seen. But we've identified a time frame where we can engage in conversation and in decision making. Pretty quickly, we've talked about recruiting issues, spring practice. I don't have all the answers. There's a rather famous practice. We're talking about practice press conference. I don't want that necessarily to be me. So what we said is at the president's chancellor's level, we'll delegate authority to our athletics directors to make some of these operational decisions, and that conversation has continued since I departed the room. We're not all at destinations at this time. We may not govern every one of those elements. In fact, the NCAA may need to engage and quickly govern some of those elements. I've sent a text to Mark Emmert suggesting the NCAA should engage in on and off campus recruiting policies and changes and candidly restrictions for a period of time while we're all dealing with this. That would set everyone on an even plane rather quickly.
Yeah, I feel like that's the next step right now, is waiting for the NCAA to make an official statement about where they're stepping in regards to all of this and how to make sure that everyone is abiding by those same rules in every single sport, because this has never happened before. Right. So we just don't know what it's going to look like for each respective sport.
And we've talked about this as we were getting lunch. If the NCAA makes a decision, you know, can you have teams that are practicing and some not practicing? If you have some schools not having their spring football practices or even their spring game, you have to be able to do that across the board. And then if you stop the NCAA tournament, men's and women's, which they have not made a decision on yet, what do you do with people's eligibility? Do you have to then turn around and give people another year of eligibility? There are so many questions right now that the NCAA is going to have to answer with decisions that are going to happen in the coming days.
We did see, though, that the SEC Network spoke with Tennessee head coach Rick Barnes about this whole decision, and he was at the SEC tournament. So let's take a listen to what he thinks of this.
Well, what we talked about right before our power talk with our team this morning, they had expressed, you know, what's going on here and this, and they had concerns. And what I just went in and spoke to them after you and I spoke was, and the decision was made, I wanted them to know this was a precautionary, you know, decision, which should be made, but I didn't want them to be alarmed. But I said I want them also to take it serious. I didn't want them to think there was somebody in this building right now that had the virus. But I said, but you have to understand this is very serious, and you've got to take it serious and not be kidding around about it, you know, and acting like you're going to touch this guy's stuff, that guy's stuff. You got to be serious about it. But I'm just happy because I do know that the right decision was made for those guys, because they really hadn't had a voice in it. And the fact is, they were wondering if we were going to do the right thing.
I think that's also really important to consider. Yes, the players are upset. The coaches are upset. Everyone's upset. This is not what anyone wanted. But coming from a coach's and a player's perspective, it's a scary situation for them, having to go into all these different places. You know, it's not their home arena. They're traveling to new places. And I mean, it's gotten to the point now where I think people are they're just really needing to be cautious about that.
And I think we're starting to understand the magnitude of the importance of just being smart and being cautious. And right now, health is more important than sports. And like, I get it. I'm an alumni of a team who's pretty dang good this year. My point is, as a fan, I could be upset that they might not play the NCAA tournament, but it's really selfish of me to say things like that when people are dying of this, and that to expose these athletes. Look at the NBA. You want to talk about athletes and players in basketball. How many players are touching that basketball? How many times is sweat being transferred from one player to the other, or high fives, or close proximity and huddles and things like that? You saw the NBA and how quickly now 2 players on the Jazz have tested positive for the coronavirus, and who knows how quickly that can spread, because you don't even know these symptoms for 10 days. And so I think we have a responsibility as human beings and as people in society to say, let's stop, let's take a step backwards, and let's see if we can contain this. And it comes at the expense of sporting events, and it sucks. Like, I think we all know that it sucks, but I think we can kind of understand where we're coming from.
Exactly. And I think probably the main thing going forward is trying to figure out how it affects the players, not necessarily what it means for who wins the championship, who doesn't, who got the title. Because honestly, regardless, it's going to have an asterisk next to it anyways. I think for a player perspective, you know, someone who's a senior, we were talking about, did they get another year? I personally, I think they'd have to give them another year should they want to have
if they
one.
want it. Yeah.
Like, I mean, the women's basketball team right now for Arkansas, they're going to be in the NCAA tournament if that happens. And like I've mentioned before, a lot of them have never played in an NCAA tournament. I don't think any of them actually have. So, you know, it's their only chance. And we'll get to some of that as well. We've got some player reaction.
Exactly, and that's a great segue to kind of look at what these players are saying. Some reaching out to social media, and we can pull those up now. Jimmy Witt being able to tweet, "Hog Nation, it's been fun. I had the best season of my life from a basketball standpoint to a life standpoint. I wouldn't trade a second of it for anything in the world. I hold a special place in my heart for y'all." Adrio Bailey also tweeting, "To all my seniors in the SEC, whatever you do next, be great." And then as you talked about the women's basketball team, this is Alexis Tolfree, and she tweeted, "It's my senior year," and kind of the palm on the hand, or the hand on the face. And you understand the frustration. You really do. These athletes have put in so much work in the off season, during the season. You know, the Ivy League has completely canceled their baseball season. And we saw a tweet from a Cornell pitcher who said, "I didn't rehab for 6 months for this." And you understand the frustration, the emotion as an athlete. It's hard.
Oh, yeah.
But you do then have to look at it from a health standpoint as well.
Right. It's just the smart thing to do, because you're thinking about the liability that teams, universities, and the SEC in general would have should they keep moving forward. It's just too much of a risk. And so it's understandable. I'm sure that we'll be hearing from Hunter Yurachek sometime soon about football, because that is the one thing that we haven't heard anything yet. They're supposed to have a couple practices next week.
Yeah, well, we speak about football, we talk about former athletes. DJ Williams is a part of our team, and so we reached out to DJ to get an athlete's perspective, to get into an athlete's mind and see how he's feeling about this. This is what DJ had to say.
What's going on, everybody? DJ Williams here, former Razorback. As you can see from the jersey back there, we got beat pretty bad at the Cotton Bowl. Darren's last year didn't work out too well. But anyway, here to let you know my perspective as far as a former professional athlete as well, and collegiate athlete, as far as this coronavirus is concerned. The suspension of seasons, cancellations of games. I think it is a wake-up call to a lot of athletes that sometimes almost feel invincible. You know, we're young, you know, have really good immune systems, healthy. You know, if we ever do get sick, we usually bounce back pretty quick just with a bottle of Gatorade, just getting some fluids. But I think with the Rudy Gobert situation, you know, an NBA All-Star in his prime, healthy as healthy can be, to test positive for the coronavirus, it almost made everyone be like, wow, this doesn't just affect the immune compromise. It doesn't affect the just elderly. It affects everyone. You know, and even though Rudy may be able to bounce back quick after getting some antibiotics and getting some rest and getting his fluids, I think it'll shed light that some people won't be able to bounce back that quick. And just to be respectful of people's space and don't be as reckless. I don't think he intentionally tried to spread the virus or contract the virus. When you see that viral clip of him putting his hands everywhere on the microphone, I think that was just the effects of thinking, surely that can't happen to me, but now we know that we can. It's almost a good thing, because now it's going to raise awareness. The suspensions, the big, you know, acts of not having fans at March Madness is making everyone now stop and actually think, let me wash my hands. Let me make sure I'm not putting other people at risk. And so it's very unfortunate. I think it's a good step in the right direction. You know, I think people really need to sit down and educate themselves on ways to prevent this. I think it may help with the whole fear factor. And so hopefully everybody pays attention to scientists and what they're saying about ways to prevent this, so we can go ahead and move past this. And another note, as far as March Madness and the SEC tournament is concerned, I know basketball players. I mean, fans or no fans, you're going to see who true competitors are. I mean, you take us down to the church league or at the local athletic club, no fans in the stands at all. People are going 110%. These kids are almost going to feel like, you know, 8th grade AAU. Just your family in the stands, and you're battling for that championship. So I'm very excited to see how that plays out as well. But always, everybody stay safe and wash them hands.
That's right. Wash your hands. Thank you, DJ.
Yeah.
But he makes a really valid point, especially from an athlete's perspective. A lot of these athletes might think that they're invincible and not a part of the risk factor, but anyone can get this. Just like any virus, it doesn't discriminate.
That was my favorite point that he made as well. I mean, when you're on a team, you never want to be the one who's like, you guys, no, I don't know if I really want to go out there. And like, you don't want to leave your team hanging. So for the SEC to step in and make that overall decision, I think is a smart move. And also, you know, it kind of reminds me of when you look back at the football season and a couple of players got mumps and it just spreads. It's that same situation. Granted, I understand it's not the same virus or anything going on right now, but that's just an example.
Sure.
And we also have some fans that I know are disappointed. A lot of them went out to Nashville and stuff. And of course, our Drew Ammon and Jason Carroll were out there. They caught up with a few of them.
It's a letdown, but I can definitely understand where people are coming from. There's a hysteria, and you need to make the public feel safe, and I think that's what they're trying to do. Disappointing, definitely, because I know we have a lot of Hawks who travel, so it's definitely going to hurt our fans not being there, but hey, it is what it is.
A lot of empty spots right there in Nashville, too.
Breaking down everything. And, people are using words hysteria, pandemic, outbreak, overreaction. I know a lot of people have really mixed emotions, and we're not public health officials, though I have direct contact with a public health professional in Seattle, of all places, and I've talked to her a lot when I've needed to talk this through with somebody who is in that field. And I texted her yesterday and I said, is this an overreaction? Is this justified? And she immediately said it's justified. And then when the SEC's tournament was canceled today, I called her to talk to her and ask her questions so that I could better understand what was happening. Because again, I'm not a public health official. I didn't go and get a master's like she did. And she's just like, you have to understand that so much is unknown about the coronavirus right now that by socially distancing yourself from each other, it's the best solution for everybody because it's going to cut down the rate of this thing spreading. They're going to be able to contain it. And right now, the United States isn't truly prepared for a big outbreak that they don't understand. And so it might sound like an overreaction to people. It might sound like media hype, but I hope people understand that be smart, be cautious. But if it's okay to just take a few weeks off, just hang out, and the world will pick back up soon. But the faster that they can figure this out and get it contained, the better. And if it takes a month instead of 3 or 4 months, because people are taking it seriously, I think that's important.
I think at the end of the day, it's just whether you think it's an overreaction or not, no one wanted this to happen. But the fact that it's become so concerning that they needed to really shows how big of a problem this could potentially become. So you got to take it seriously. I think they made the right decision. They're taking care of the athletes and the fans as well. And that's what's really important.
They're being proactive instead of reactive in something like this. I think it's important. And Greg Sankey was asked about, what do you say to people who say you're overreacting? And I think his answer was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, being proactive instead of reactive, not waiting for something to happen, because like we said earlier, what if something happens and one of those players got coronavirus? Then, you're held liable for what happened to that player. And same goes with university athletics as well. If, someone's over at Baum Stadium and gets it, then they're liable. So it's just making sure that, honestly, everyone is taking care of themselves.
Absolutely. Well, of course, this affects Arkansas athletics, not just the basketball team, but baseball, softball, track, gymnastics, golf. All of the play is suspended until at least March 30th, and then they will go to March 30th and reevaluate and whether or not they need to extend. I know a lot of fans have questions. What does that mean for tickets? What does that mean for my money? What does that mean, for school just making the announcement that now all U of A classes will go online. And so it's a lot of moving parts. It's a very fluid situation, and we're hoping to get all of those answers. Again, we're going to have a statement from Hunter Yurachek, but when we asked the university for statements from coaches, we were told that they will not release any kind of specific statements from coaches until Hunter has an opportunity to meet with them. And of course, he is on his way back from Nashville. But we're hoping to get a lot of answers on what all this means for Arkansas athletics. It's going to be eerie a little bit, Tara, because it's going to be a dead campus. And we're not going to have anything to cover for 2.5 weeks now.
Guys, I don't know what we're going to do with ourselves if we don't have any sports. On a realistic note, but honestly, it's like I mentioned, it's the smart move, and I think it'll give some people time to really evaluate, what's best. There's going to be a lot of questions going on, and I think first and foremost, yes, they are concerned about making sure the fans know, where they're going, but I think the university is going to focus on the players and what happens with them, their scholarships, their time here at the university. And then we'll probably start to learn some of the answers about, season tickets and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Student athletes right now, the coaches, the staff is kind of their #1 priority, and then they will work their way down. We appreciate you tuning in with us. It has been a crazy past 24, 36 hours, 48 hours because of all this talk of things possibly happening and then things coming to fruition and actually happening. So we're going to continue to get more and more information, and so I hope that you stay with us as we continue to pass on that information to you. Drew Ammon's going to join us for our shows later on tonight to talk more from Nashville, and Mike Irwin's going to come and join us. He's a man who's been covering the Razorbacks now for 45 years, has never experienced something like this. So we'll get Mike's analysis and expert opinion on that as well. For Tara Talmadge, I'm Melissa Orange. Another thanks to Drew Ammon and Jarrison Carroll on the ground in Nashville. Thanks for watching.